almost 90% of my close group caught a flight and went to US. And I found myself in a train going to Bombay to work for L&T. And that was the first time I realized that maybe what you achieve in life is not so much a function of your ability, but it's a function of your ambition, and the exposure that you get. And therefore, I that really stayed with me, And this idea about start learning about many different things, talk to many different people, figure out what those guys are doing, because that kind of an exposure, that kind of an ambition will get you where you want to go in life. Ability follows, ambition is the first thing which sets the goal. I think that was a turning point in my life.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Second Innings. I'm Suman Ghosh and with me is my co-host Atul Nath. Today we have with us a special guest, Ravi Sharma. Ravi Sharma works in the leadership development space with corporate India and startups in the Silicon Valley. He works with senior high potential leaders and supports them to convert their potential into performance. Ravi studied at the Delhi College of Engineering and then at IIM Bangalore, and subsequently has worked at multiple corporates like L&T, Procter & Gamble, and Becton Dickinson. Ravi has led workshops with business leaders in Australia, China, Germany, Singapore, Sri Lanka, apart from India. He founded New Synapses in 2010, which has worked with more than 150 corporate clients in India and the US. Welcome, Ravi.
Good to be here. Good to be amongst friends. And I have seen some of your series, and it is a pleasure to be here.
So I think, as usual, the way we can start, Ravi, is as you know. I mean, we know a lot about you, and I can say from personal experience, a lot of it is very exciting and very interesting. You've done some really crazy, fun stuff over the years. So why don't we go back a little bit, and why don't you share a little bit about your formative years, let's say, or the origin years growing up? What is the kind of time you spent very early in your life, school, and stuff like that. So tell us a little more about that to begin with.
I actually had a very, very good childhood. And when I say very good, it isn't that there was a lot of money, but we were never short of money. My father was a teacher and my mother was a teacher too. And we used to live in Meerut. And I have lots and lots of very fond memories. So it was my parents and my younger sister. And the good thing would be that by the time we would come back from school, uh, both my parents would be home too, because they used to also teach. And so by around 2, 3 o'clock, all four of us would be in the house. And my parents had this crazy habit of taking an afternoon siesta. So by 5 o'clock, the whole house will be together and we'll be buzzing. So those are very, very good memories that I have. And then uh, went to Delhi College of Engineering, which was again easier because you could get there because of the merit that you scored in your class 12. And I think all the crazy thing began to happen with me when I was in college. And the most important one was that you were with other brilliant students. The last student in my class would have 92% marks in his boards. So I think that's where the real fun of life started. So yeah, lots of good memories there. I do remember some of the initial months in Delhi when I was in Delhi College of Engineering that I used to get very homesick, and I would run away to Meerut at the slightest of opportunity.
I don't want to sound like a psychiatrist or psychologist, but you said I missed home, so I used to go home a lot. What is it about home that you missed? And the reason I'm asking you is from a perspective that was obviously, I mean, the formative, very impressionable years of your life, pre 17, 18 years old, which is when I assume you went to college. So what was it that you missed that took you back, apart from, of course, your sister and your parents and that bond? What else was there?
I think one, it was just plain easy. We used to be in Kashmiri Gate. Delhi College of Engineering was in Kashmiri Gate. And I knew that my parents were hurting, that I was a very my father used to really dote on me, and he still does, and sometimes it feels very odd because I'm like 54, 55, and my father is 84. But when he's around, he makes me feel like a small boy. He'll come and try to feed me food and stuff like that. So he was like that, and I didn't want to make him feel that I've gone away. People need to care for each other, and if I could, I would go back. I think that stayed with me for some time.
Thanks for painting that picture, and that gives us an
Yeah.
idea. And like Atul says, a lot of things that happen in your childhood eventually connects, right, into what we turn out to be. Um
I think the first story that started to make me uh, think about life in a different manner actually happened towards the fourth year of my college, and that was when a lot of my friends who had come from Delhi or Bombay or big cities, I had come from Mirror. These friends started to prepare to go to US, and somehow I never had that ambition. And what happened was that towards the end of fourth year, these people got their admissions, and in July, almost 90% of my close group caught a flight and went to US. And I found myself in a train going to Bombay to work for L&T. And that was the first time I realized that maybe what you achieve in life is not so much a function of your ability, but it's a function of your ambition, and the exposure that you get. And therefore, I that really stayed with me, and this idea about start learning about many different things, talk to many different people, figure out what those guys are doing, because that kind of an exposure, that kind of an ambition will get you where you want to go in life. Ability follows, ambition is the first thing which sets the goal. I think that was a turning point in my life. What happened was once I reached Bombay and I started working for L&T. This is way back in '91. Uh, there, for the first 3 4 months, I realized that I don't like being an engineer. I didn't like the work. I All my friends had gone, and therefore I realized that this is not what I want. I worked for 3 years before I came into the IIM, and that was a very deliberate move, and uh, yeah. So I think from there on, this idea about if one wants, one can choose what one wants to do. I think that happened very clearly in my head, very early, you know. And I remember there was one story. I was in L&T, and they were doing this all the new engineers orientation kind of a program. And there was this one management guru kind of a person who was doing this for us. There was 40 50 GETs in the room, and he asked everybody to write what is it that they want to do. What will make you successful in life. And when it was my turn, I looked at the room and I said, um, I want to be like the Zakir Hussain of. Remember, there was a tea ad, Wahataj, and which Zakir Hussain was playing the tabla, and he would go so crazy while doing this, and his sweat would, fall everywhere. His hair is moving, and then he'll stop and say Wahataj. So I used to wonder that if somebody can get so immersed in what he's doing, and at the end of it, people come and pay him, what beautiful life will that be?
Wow.
So I remember saying this in the first 2 months of my first job, that I want to be the Zakir Hussain. I want to be doing something in which I really enjoy myself, and then somebody pays me for it.
And
And I
all your
remember
fellow
how,
engineers must have thought, what a crazy guy. What the
yeah,
hell is he
and
talking
some of them
about? Yeah.
actually, So there was laughter. It was
Yeah,
almost like
exactly. Yeah.
I, I think many of them actually felt that I didn't get the question. You know,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
and for me it was real. I knew it was out of place. I knew it was an odd thing to say, but
Hmm.
I said it because I believed it. I don't know why,
Hmm.
and that kind of stayed with me. So then the decision to do an MBA was easy. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, Ravi, talk to us a little bit about post MBA, because you worked for some time before you actually took the plunge. So, briefly, just so that the audience gets an idea, what's been the journey like, and maybe stop at the second innings, because then we can delve deeper into that.
Sure. So I think I really enjoyed the IM, and I know both of all of us are from the same batch. I remember a lot of things that we did, which was so much fun. And I was lucky that I got through Procter and Gamble, which was a very valued company on campus, and that was a great experience. What happened for me in PNG is I got into brands, and I worked on Ariel for the first 2 years. But this was a crazy time. This was, if you guys remember, this is the second part of 90s, where the channel proliferation had begun to happen. The satellite
Hmm.
TV
Hmm.
had come in, and after this, we realized that in those 7 8 years of the channels being there, media became very difficult to handle for the brands, and therefore PNG wanted to get into direct marketing. There was a project where we decided to focus on the top 23 metros, and direct marketing became a method to do that. There was nobody in India who knew direct marketing well in our company as well, and that's another plunge that I took. So I remember going up to my boss and saying, "I want to do this. I want to learn about this, and then do this in India," which was again a little crazy, because uh, nobody in his sane mind would move out of brands. But this was exciting stuff. This was new stuff. And it was almost like starting a company within the company. And we did some major work there. But that, I think, gave me a lot of confidence in starting something on my own. So I started to get this feeling कि ये सब हो सकता है. This is possible. You know, uh, when I went to Becton Dickinson, which was a medical device company, and worked there as a business head for the next 3 4 years. Yeah, so that was the early part of the career. All very exciting.
Through this journey, and you talked about this uh, in in 1991, 92, when you were at L&T, that you had the feeling that you didn't necessarily have to do that, and you could do something different. Also at PNG, you immediately looked for this opportunity to create something from scratch. So when through this process, Ravi, did you first kind of get a sense that "Yaar, I'm going to do something of my own for sure"? One is that it was a thought. One is that you may not have done it immediately, but when was the
Yeah.
first time?
So Atul and Suman, I think I don't know how to say it without sounding odd, but I think very early in my life I realized that I can't bear with a boss. So that realization happened very early. And I think in all my jobs, very soon I would want to avoid the boss. So I want to do things on my own. And when I came to PNG, I did the same thing. That I started direct marketing. I would meet my boss once in a month, and I'd set up my own goals. I'll just align him with it, and then run it almost like a company within the company. Uh, then when Becton happened, I I had grown enough to head a business. So I had the P&L responsibility for a business, and therefore, I think very early this idea that it is very difficult to have a boss. That happened for me, and sometimes that pushes you into making decisions where you have risk, but you can take the calls. You know, in fact, when I was trying to take this thing about starting on my own, I read a lot. It wasn't like one fine day I got this feeling and I just started. I actually did a lot of research and deliberation on this. And what
Hmm.
I learned was that there was a study in the US. There are a lot of people who leave corporate jobs and start on their own, may not end up doing as well financially as perhaps they could have done if they had continued in the job. But what happens is that the gains that they get of many different types, of being on their own, of having this dopamine high on achievement, or this freedom that they experience, is so good that they don't really mind losing some money in the process.
Yeah, makes it
You
worth
know,
it in that sense. Yeah.
so and that is so wonderful that I got that urge very early in my life. In PNG, because we had started direct marketing, I had to learn about direct marketing and teach direct marketing within PNG. And imagine I was just fresh out of the IM. Uh, I
Wow.
would go into
Mm.
rooms where there'll be category heads, there'll be brand managers. I think that thing about getting into a room and doing a workshop, kind of a learning event, stayed with me. So when I went to Becton, they were asking for leaders around the world to volunteer to become part of the BD University. And I opted for that. For 1 week, I would go around the world doing this work. In one of those trips, when I was returning to India, I had this external facilitator, Mike Smith, who was also co facilitating that. And he started asking me that, would you like to do this full time because you do this really well?
And I was talking to Atul the other day, based on what we've heard from the other guests. There's always a combination of push and pull, right?
Yeah,
In terms of taking the plunge, there's a
yeah,
lot of people who are fence sitters who wants to do something, right? I mean, if you ask around, there are a lot of people like that, but very small percentage of that actually take the plunge.
yeah,
And I think it's a combination of push and pull. Whereas the way you narrated those stories, it's becoming evidently clear. So, for instance, your push was you didn't like being an engineer. You were very clear, right? Uh, your push was you want to avoid the boss. At the same time, the pull was now you had the confidence. The pull was you're doing something which which you're already enjoying, isn't it? So
yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah. So, but then there is a trade-off because you are getting something which the Zakir Hussain effect, which you're not going to get at your work.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it has happened so many times, Suman, that and Atul, that when I do these workshops, a lot of people come to me at the end of the 2 days and they start talking to me about, tell us your story. How come you left such a good job and you started being in the room? What made you do that? So I tell them something. And then very quickly I ask them, why are you asking me this? Because it is not about you're interested in the story because you have a story in your mind. Tell me why you ask. And then 9 out of 10 times they would say that, look, I want to do something like that. I really want to do this. And one thing that I have begun to wonder about is that when people are seriously considering a second innings, of the two things that you're saying, Suman, that obviously whenever a change will happen, it will happen because of the pull and the push. But if somebody is taking a call to do a second innings more because of the push, that they don't like something, then I give them a little hug and a little note of caution. Because in my mind, it is like, I don't like being in this room. I'm uncomfortable in this room. And therefore, I get out, and whatever door I see open, I get into that. That doesn't work, yeah. Because then you get into that door, and after some time, you get uncomfortable with that door. What I start asking people is, tell me, what is it that you really want to do? Can you find what you really want? Because once you and work hard on that, take your time to figure that out. When I was in
Having
this,
said that, it's interesting you mentioned that sometimes it could be a trait which is there with you. You may not know what exactly you're going to do. Like you watched that episode with Anshu, he was very clear he wanted to be on stage and he liked being funny. So those two intersected very well, but he didn't start off saying, I'm going to be a stand up comedian,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah,
There have been
yeah,
other cases where people have done something, then they found something very different, which was interesting,
yeah,
right? Uh,
yeah,
because often what happens is either they don't do the second innings,
yeah,
or if they've done it, they've done 5 innings,
yeah,
isn't it? Because
correct,
they're constantly rediscovering themselves,
yeah,
isn't it? Yeah. So it's all types. I say some people. I think this is about the thing about do you know your passion or do you discover your passion?
discover your passion.
Yeah.
True,
Yeah.
true.
The
See,
push
there's a
often the push often is something that will uh, get you off your butt to do something, right?
to explore something.
The push is what kind of drives you to do something. It can happen the other way as well. We've had experiences where the pull, I mean, like Anshu's case, in fact, where he was happy. Microsoft was a great place to work for him. He enjoyed his work, Xbox, and all of that. But the pull was so strong that it kind of just pulled him out of that. So the push can be a very strong push, and then, like Suman said, that either you go out and discover your passion, or your passion kind of drives you as well. So I think the push is an important factor from a lighting a match under your butt kind of.
I was fortunate that I read a book called What Color is Your Parachute? And What Color is Your Parachute is a book which actually helps people to explore new possibilities. I would recommend that book very, very strongly. And it basically suggests a few steps. It says, if you're clear about what you want to do, list down 8 people in 100-kilometer radius of where you are who are doing what you wish to do. They're living your life. If you can't even list down 8 people, then maybe whatever you're thinking is very utopian. It is not a practical thing to do. If you can list down 8 people, then go and meet them, and then check with them, are they really having the life that you imagine you would have? Are they really enjoying what they're doing? Are they making the money that you hope to make? Are they happy with the new combination they have created in your life? And then listen to their stories about how have they arrived there. And if you listen to 5, 6, 7, 8 different stories, one, it'll strengthen your resolve, because if you see that they're doing what you wish to do, then it'll make it easy for you to do it. Second, in their stories, you'll figure out a path. If they all tell you, this is what I used to do, this is what I started doing, blah blah blah, then you get to know, yeah, if I do 1, 2, 3, 4, I'll get here. That I did very, very religiously. So I didn't suddenly, I mean, when Mr. Moore said that he saw Tamasha and then next day morning he went and put in his papers, I didn't have the courage to do it. Kudos to him that he could do it. I actually simmered with the idea for some time.
So it was not
And
Tamasha. Which movie did you watch?
no, it was. It wasn't the movie. That's why I'm saying. So I read the book and I tried and meet so many people. I met 7, 8 people, and it took me a 7, 8, 9 months to do that. Fortunately for me, this was the good time of Indian consulting. This was 2006, 7, and India was doing well. So a lot of these guys made me this offer that you come and you become a part of us, and we'll share revenues with you. That started to give me the courage that this can be done. So my second innings, uh, if one prefers to call it so, was thoughtful. It wasn't. It was very deliberate. I really did a lot of rigorous research before I took the plunge.
You mentioned, Ravi, that teaching. Do you think there's a connection there with your parents and what they did? You think there was a something there?
So I have wondered about it, Atul. I've many times wondered about it, and I'm sure there is. There is this whole
Hmm.
idea about uh, when I see it around me. A lot of people follow in the footsteps of their parents. They will take the professions that their parents do, because I sometimes feel it is because of the exposure that they get, because the parents only know about that, so they only tell this and so on, so on.
That's a
Uh,
different thing. That
huh,
that policeman, their kids going into police or army kids often, often go into the forces and all that. You're absolutely right. That's a lifestyle thing. Here. You've gone in a totally different direction, and
yeah,
I didn't mean it the way in that sense. What I meant
hmm,
was that you valued that as an ethos, or
yeah.
you saw that imparting knowledge was something that you saw as something being of great value, and as a result you valued it as well. So I don't know, I just saw that maybe there was some
So,
connection there.
mm, so it could be. I'm not denying that. The fact that I saw my parents have a very happy life. They were very happy doing
Yeah,
what they were doing. Somewhere it
but
gave
I'm
me the
pretty sure you
comfort.
don't have siestas in the afternoon.
No more. No, not at all. Never.
Oh, I
But
thought you carry on the family tradition.
I wish I could. Yeah, there are sometimes I miss that. Uh,
That the students do when he's teaching in the afternoon.
yeah, and that's why I never do a second half where we are just talking. I'm teaching it from something. We're
Hmm.
always doing something where they're not on a chair. they will have to fall off. Um,
Mm,
when I think about people making drastic changes, from being a company corporate person to go and teach in this way. Uh, Remember the ENSOF matrix? Remember the ENSOF matrix in marketing we used to do, which is
mm,
same product, same
mm.
market,
Yeah,
new
yeah,
market.
agree.
And you could do product
It's that two by two, right?
that's a
It's
two
the
by
two
two.
by two
It's
new
the two
The
by
two
two.
by
product
two,
market,
basically
two
about
axis. Yeah,
market
yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
expansion and market
It
Market
is.
expansion.
penetration.
It is
Yeah,
where do you
yeah.
get the
Mm,
new dollar? Where do you
yeah.
get the new dollar?
Right,
Mm,
right,
And if
right.
you are in the same product, same market, then you do penetration.
yeah.
Otherwise, you do product expansion or market expansion.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
typically, when people make career changes, they do it as per the ENSOF. So I'm marketing in PNG. I will change my industry. I will go to durables maybe, or I'll go to telecom, but I'll continue to do marketing. So I'm
mm,
still using a skill that I learned here.
mm.
Or within the same industry, I'll move from one expertise to another. So
Sure.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm still in FMCG, but I'll move from marketing to sales,
Sales.
or
Yeah.
I'll move to something else. So I'm holding
Mm,
on to something and then taking changing another variable. So these are
mm,
the
mm,
easier shifts. Uh, the difficult one is where you have to go tangential. It's a new market and a new expertise, and this was something like that. Whenever people are hoping to make that kind of a shift, then the ENSOF works very well, because in the ENSOF, what they teach is that if you have to do something like this, which is a total diversification is the new market and a new ability, then you need to have some core competence. And therefore, people really exploring what is the core competence that I have that I will utilize in that area. If you're making a drastic shift like the one that I decided to make, then you need to really drill down into what is making me um, look for this. What are the two, three core competencies that I believe I have?
So I think there are multiple dimensions in this, Ravi. I think a lot of we talked about was what is it that you get into. I think like you explained through the hands-off, right? As you were talking, I was thinking of my experience and matching it with yours because we went to IIM and now we are doing very similar work. I spend my time in
Yeah,
workshops. You said you were you did a very drastic thing, and I'm thinking maybe mine was even more drastic because you had that experience of being in rooms,
yeah,
being with BD, Becton
yeah. Very
Dickinson, and
true.
with PNG, which
Very
I
true.
didn't have. So then what happens is it's and typically when you do the second innings, it's a lot to do with passion. Now, just because it's your passion doesn't mean you may be good at it, right? It takes a while to build that skill, isn't
yeah,
it? Uh,
yeah,
and same happened with me. I mean, I was suddenly in workshops, but I've never done workshops. So it took me a while to get to a certain level and be good at it, isn't
yeah,
it? Uh, so that's about the what part. But let's also talk about the when part, because
yeah,
that's the real plunge, right? It's all very good to be cognitively looking at Excel sheets. And a lot of the people who are fence sitters are saying, hey, you know what? I want to do this. I'm very passionate. But maybe now is not the right time. Maybe I get my next promotion. I need to make a little more money. My corpus needs to be bigger. Its children need to grow up. You can have a lot of reasons as to why you don't want to do it, isn't it?
yeah,
Yet when you're actually doing it, it's that's what I call my favorite, the hot state. Cold state is all very rational. Hot state is emotional, right?
yeah,
Suddenly you're walking away from money. Suddenly, life takes over, isn't it?
yeah.
Uh, so from for you, from the time you realized that okay, I want to do something on my own, how long was it till you actually took the plunge? And uh, did you have an idea in mind from the time you had that okay, in the next 18 months I'll this thing, or it was how did you figure out when the time was right?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So there were two things running in my mind at that time. One was that the thing that I wanted to do, which is to become a consultant in the learning space, the management and the change space. It told me that if I can really do this well, then the good thing is that I don't retire, or I can continue to hope to work beyond 60 years. So as long as I can keep myself healthy and I can keep my knowledge updated, then I won't have to retire. In fact, I did another research that I did is at that time I looked into who are the top 100 management gurus around the world. That was really it was crazy. But when I looked at it, I realized that almost all of them were in their 60s. Even today, when I do a refresh on that list very often, I realize that most of the management gurus are above 60, except for Simon Sinek, who, if you consider him as a management guru, he's more a social media thing. But
Mm.
he's a fantastic guy, and he's the only one who's 50, but everybody else is 60 plus.
So you still
Uh,
have a few years to go to make before you make that list.
interest. So even if I don't make the list, I think I have the years safe with me, so I don't have to worry about retiring at 60. I
And
think
you are
that
better
is.
off at 60 without a boss, right? Than
and
you would have
and
been with a
imagine that
boss.
what you have to do is live in ambiguity or live in uncertainty for about 2-3 years in your 40s, maybe. 40 is a good time to take the plunge. Mid 40s is a great time to take the plunge, because by then most of your responsibilities are settled. Your kids are on a particular path, you have accumulated some money. I used to take this very seriously, that what the a lot of financial advisors say, that if you have cash for 6 months, if you have enough deposits that can take care of you for about a year and a half too, then you can take the plunge, because otherwise you'll never take the plunge. uh, the financial question is an important question. Having said that, I think one has to set limits to how much money is good enough money. You know.
So when you said a certain figure, was it like a certain corpus that you needed to build up?
So yes. So I had a figure in my mind that once I have that figure, then I can take the plunge, and
Okay, okay.
I did look at that number.
Because the reason I'm saying is it can also lead to a bit of procrastination.
Yeah.
Somebody wants to do that. Okay, you're still waiting for that magic figure to arrive. And it's like a moving goalpost. And then you say, no, 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 cost of living has gone up. But all that happens because you're essentially justifying, to yourself as to why you're not taking the plunge. And I keep harping on the plunge because I think that's the most difficult.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's all very nice, rational stuff. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that. When you actually took the plunge, okay, you've done all that. What was the experience like? What was going through you? What feelings were you having that time?
Very often in our childhood, very early childhood, we would go back to that village for some of our vacations. And there, all of us kids, all the cousins used to play a game. The game was that you go from one mango tree to another mango tree without coming to the ground. And mango trees are like that, the branches start off pretty early. So it is not very high. The branches get into each other. But there was always be a point where if you're trying to go from one mango tree branch to another mango tree's branch, sometimes you didn't have anything to hold on to, and that was the test of, have you grown up enough? That you're trying to go, and you are almost uncertain, and there will be a period of maybe a few seconds where you have nothing to hold on to, and you'll go to the other tree. I think that feeling will happen for everyone, you know that being in that uncertainty, ambiguity, that feeling of, oh my god, what happens if, the whole what if, that fear will remain. I think that's where your pull push becomes really important. That if your pull is not powerful enough, you know if the pull is not powerful enough, that hesitancy will remain. It's a new identity you have to take on. Some of us become very comfortable. I'm a corporate person. I People respect me because of my job, because of my designation. I go to office, then I get this kind of work, blah blah blah. Tomorrow if I do something different, all this will go away. If you are locked in that identity and you don't have a powerful visualization of your new identity, then it doesn't pull you. You know, somehow I think I'm fortunate that I pushed for this identity within my own companies. So in Becton, I had done this work. I would roam around the world doing this work. One week in a quarter where I would do this gave me enough of a feel of what it could be like. Now it was only about, will these people trust me if I'm not from their company? The only risk I was
Yeah.
running was that in
Yeah.
Becton I was still one of their business heads who was doing a session. If I go into another company, there would be no affinity like that, or
Yeah.
uh, uh, there's no excuse like that. I'm somebody who's actually bought their time and doing
Hmm.
this. So, but the pull was so hard that one could do this. I think that's where something like what you guys are doing. where you're sharing experiences, where you are making these people, making anybody who's thinking about it, look for support, look for people. You know, there's a
You
how
can
do I
only
say it?
give perspectives. You cannot give advice. Each to their own.
Yeah,
Everything.
yeah,
Every person is different. That's one thing which has been an eye opener for us as well.
yeah,
That the very little convergence. We have all kinds across the spectrum.
yeah,
But the interesting thing is that, and that's why I like, Suman, you and I have been talking about this now for over 6, 8 months now. But that's why I like the idea of approaching this from a personal stories perspective rather than a theoretical perspective.
yeah,
Oh,
Because,
absolutely.
theory very often can be prescriptive, in fact, try to be prescriptive. But the stories thing, the best thing I like about it is that almost in every story I'll find one aspect which will resonate with me, that
mm,
oh yeah, yeah, this is that's true, that's interesting, that works for me.
yeah,
And I can imagine that a lot of fence sitters or a lot of people who think about it, must be listening to someone's story and saying, yeah, yeah, hey, I must do something on this along these lines. And
yeah,
that's why stories are very interesting, in terms of helping people to identify and potentially do what they could want to do.
yeah. There's a there's a very interesting bias. It's called if I remember it right, it's called the Donnelly-Kruger bias. And the Donnelly-Kruger bias is that if you don't know about a space, you're very confident about it. If the more
Sound
you know
should be
about a
It
space,
should
the
be
more
called the
cautious you
MBA
become.
bias. Should be called the MBA bias. We'll edit this part out, but that's
Yeah.
what it should actually be called. Sorry,
Yeah, but
go
this
ahead.
idea about the more you start learning about a space, then you become more cautious. So the people who are actually doing the bungee jumping, some of the people who are really good at that are the people who will make sure that they are testing the rope. They've seen one or two people jump, that they are sure about w- the people who are providing the equipment, and therefore when he takes the jump, for a lot of people, he's taking a risk. But
Hmm.
he's tried to eliminate at least some of the obvious pitfalls. So I think it'll still appear like you're going into uncertainty, you're going into ambiguity. There will be a little bit of fear and anxiety. Embracing that fear, but with as much information as you can collect. As much. I think that will make it more. Uh, it'll give you the tenacity to stay with the ambiguity.
But a lot of this is mindset, Ravi, and we talk about this all the time, right? But it requires a fair bit of humility, vulnerability, curiosity, learning, right? Often those traits are less in a corporate environment. Whether you like it or not, there is a bit of sense of entitlement that can creep in. Your identity is now with the company. So I think, and I keep saying, I think there's a lot of unlearning that has to happen as you step out, because suddenly you're in a new world altogether.
People who do it with a lot of pull, that they can't do anything else, that they're just dying to do this thing now, and so that even if there are headwinds, they will persist. They will stay the course. They'll let something else go, but won't let this go. you know so I think that passion is required, and in that it can't happen without everything that you mentioned. There has to be uh, vulnerability, there has to be the whole idea about learning new skills, honing up new skills, depending on your network, reaching out to your network, asking for support. you know I think
Yeah, and me and
everything happens.
Atul have spent a lot of time just deliberating what constitutes a second innings, because you have the entire spectrum. There could be somebody who's had a very great corporate life. He's about to retire. He's got lots of money in the bank. He wants to try out something, but the moment there's a little bit of pushback, he say, "Hey, why am I doing this? Let me just
Yeah,
go and play golf." Right?
yeah,
The
yeah,
point is, have you been long enough? Is it something that you are willing to sacrifice? What is your
Yeah.
commitment to this? Right? So all of them constitutes a second innings,
yeah.
isn't it?
So I, in the first few months that I did this and started my company, I was by myself. I would have to make sales calls, and I would sometimes change my voice to do the call. so that I don't appear to be the same guy who was saying in the morning, "Do you guys have a need? I just learned about you just through something."
I'm
And
smiling
then
because I remember this story vividly. You had told me, and it stayed with me because it was a story saying you'd
and then
cover it with a handkerchief, and it would sound like it's calling from
yeah,
the office.
and
I thought that
it,
was
it it
fascinating. Yeah,
wasn't because I was happy to do it. It was just that I realized that you can't be the guy who called in the morning and then who's arriving in the evening. So sometimes I had to do that. I had to sit in the lobby of people that used to report to me in my earlier job, and it was okay. When I look back at it, it sounds like, oh my God, what a terrible time. But it didn't appear like a terrible time because those were friends and I was willing to wait. And once in a while, this thought would come, कि यार ये मिल क्यों नहीं रहा? Why is it not meeting? But once you are in the room, then you have got into a conversation that is happening for you. I think
Yeah.
those are the few moments where whatever is giving you joy has to be so powerful that you can go through some pain for it.
You mentioned Ravi that you were alone doing this, and I just wanted to talk about, did you ever think about having a partner along for this journey in terms of a business partner, or doing it along with someone, or you enjoyed doing it by yourself? I mean, was that a part of your decision making process at any stage?
So when I started a company, so initially I went out like a freelancer, so for the 9, 10 months I was a freelancer. And then I felt, no, this can happen and this needs to scale up and I need to have partners. So when we created the company, then I actually reached out and found two friends who worked with me. Uh, Eventually, that didn't really happen, so I had to later buy buy their stake out, so it went through a little troubled water there.
So what was that experience like, Ravi, in terms of sitting down and working with friends who and you doing a partnering with them, and then having to kind of dial that back and not work with them? What was that experience like? Because a lot of people who are sitting on the fence would be doing that with people they
Yeah,
know, right? So it'll be
yeah,
interesting to hear that story
yeah.
as well.
It is very important to find friends who will support you, who will create alternate thought process, who will sometimes question your assumptions, who will say, you think you are really good in the room, but what makes you believe that you're really good at the room? Show me what you have, or let's go, I'll arrange a program for you in a friend's company. I'll be sitting there, you go do the workshop, I'll see whether it is right. So we need people who can challenge you like that. I think that's very important. When it comes to creating a company and then creating roles for people in the company, I think having a very clear charter, and a very clear idea about what is the contribution of these different people to that company, having a very clear understanding on that, and then holding people accountable for that role becomes very important. I think sometimes we don't do that. Sometimes if there are three bodies around a table who are starting a company, you would say, okay, everybody gets one third, one third, one. Uh, which, if the people don't pull their weight after some time, can become troublesome. Because then you are resenting it, and then you are saying, boss, this guy doesn't put as much work, he doesn't put as much effort. Why the hell am I paying this guy? And why is he doing what he's doing? So I think a little bit of that begins to happen, and no bad intentions from those people. I think they're committed people, but at the end of the day, what I learned is, whatever you create, that company is an independent identity. You know, it deserves what it is giving to other people. So there's a very interesting story there. So one of my partners, and I'm very indebted to her because she was the one who got me both my jobs outside of campus. And she was the one who actually said that, Ravi, you should start a company. And if you fail, then don't worry, because she runs a very interesting executive search firm. And she said that I would actually get you back into the corporate if you want to go back if you fail. That gave me a lot of courage. You know, but in about 1 or 2 years, we realized that because she was so committed to her own work, because she was so busy, her contributions here were not really making a difference. And I had to politely go and ask her that if she really wants to continue with this, because it is not really working out. Now, thankfully, she stayed a friend, but those are some of the hard calls you have to take. So I realized after some time that uh, I have to buy out some of this stake, uh, and I ended up doing that. Today, when I look for partners, we are in a situation where we 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 really give them a long rope, so a long time to prove themselves. You know, so they will come in, they will do the work, and then first we'll go on to revenue sharing. Then we'll get into uh, actually deciding what part of the company they'll take care of before even come to a decision of are they uh, technically stakeholders in the company. So, and that experience has come out very handy when I do a lot of coaching work with startups. You know, a lot of the questions in the early startups is about what stake should we get and what is the role of my partner. Having that candid discussion, saying, "What do you see that person bringing to the table?" You know, I think that is an important discussion. So, if one is starting a second innings by bringing a few people in, it is important to at least not just be in that bonhomie or the excitement and saying, "Let's start, we'll figure it out later." You know, this later business can be painful.
Very painful.
Have
Very, very
have
painful.
at
Yeah.
least as much clarity on the roles and responsibility. Have a charter for the person, and the charters may change. By the way, you know, they may charter is a live document. Charter is not what we decided 2 years ago, and then you are
Yeah.
trying to search for that paper. You know, a
Yeah.
charter is a very live document,
Hmm.
and and then make that call, because
Hmm.
otherwise some of these things tire you out. You know, you move away from what was really giving you joy to managing this whole process of working with others. I think that can tire you. Yeah. I think one thing that I have learned is that networks help. You know, your especially if you are starting something on your own, if you're starting a new innings, as you call it, where there will be ambiguity. You know, where there will be a little. You need a few opportunities which will come your way because people will trust you. And uh, I think somewhere the idea about your past credibility with those people, you know, and your belief in what you do will create the first opportunities. You have to make the most of your first opportunities. I think the first 1 year or so is really important. That's where you have to really double down and say, I have to make this work. And if for some time, and therefore the idea about celebrating early wins, you know, the first few programs that you do well, you're coming home and you're actually feeling good about it. You know, you're talking to people about it. I used to come and tell my kids of what I did in the program, you know, and what happened. And these were little boys, yeah, they were like class 8, class 5. I remember taking my children to my programs, you know, and I would make them help me. So in a session, they would sometimes put up the posters. They would sometimes give out the equipment that we are doing to make a simulation happen, or something. And I would involve them because I wanted them to feel proud about what I was doing. You know, I wanted them to get engaged with that. Today, if you ask my kids, the biggest pride that I have is that if you ask my kids today, uh, and they say it amongst their cousins, they say to their friends that when we look at our father, the one thing that we've learned is you should do what you really want to do. You know, so one thing that we learned from our father is that have the courage to do what you really want. And if we can do that in our life, that'll be so good. That uh, it does have its pains. I'm not saying that everything was wonderful or that everything is wonderful even today, but I think this desire to make people engage with you, especially your dear ones, can help.
So Ravi,
Yeah.
you're it's very clear from the way you're talking that a lot of what you're doing is straight from the heart, but straight from the heart through your head and then being implemented. A lot of thought goes into figuring out the whats and the whys and the hows, and not just straight off plunges. So looking back now, what would you look back and say, these are the things I would definitely do same as I've done in the past, but what are the things you would do slightly differently
Yeah.
in your transition journey into what you're doing now?
What I would do same is that uh, I would want to be in the room. So one thing that when we got our initial success and the workshop started to become good, we started getting a lot of repeat business. There was this whole idea about we should scale up, and get more facilitators in, or try to get a franchisee into India, because you have open doors where you can take that franchisee and all that. And I realized very early in my life that if I'm a good chef, then I don't want to be necessarily a restaurant owner, or I definitely don't want to have a chain of restaurant where I'm managing the chain now. My real pleasure or my real joy comes in being in the room. So don't let that go. So I would do that. I think I would continue to be in the room. I would continue to be in the coaching conversations till I can. I'm almost inclined to say till I die, but at least till I am healthy, and I'm updated. So I don't want to let that go. I would still do that. What I
So,
would
Ravi,
do
it's interesting you said that. So, one of the metaphors that I use in my coaching conversation is, and which a lot of people kind of start thinking, is do you want to be a school teacher or a principal? It's exactly the same because, and when you look back, you remember teachers, you don't remember the principals of the schools, right?
yeah,
The one who has the impact is the teacher, and it's not the
yeah,
subject teacher, it's some
correct,
teacher who made a big difference and made a
correct,
big impact, right? And that
absolutely,
sets people thinking because are they looking at more administrative stuff or are they looking at really trying to add value themselves?
absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely.
And
I
just
think
to
the
connect that in the context of our conversation about second innings even deeper, is that what is the linkage of that with your passion? So your passion was to actually impart the knowledge, engage with people, see the difference being made, etc. Which, yes, it's possible if you became the principal, and I'm just using Suman's analogy. If you become the principal, you will have impact, but your passion may not get as fulfilled as it was by actually doing the engagement. So
yeah,
while it's taken you down that journey and you've gone from being a teacher to a principal, which is supposed to be a higher position, so to speak,
yeah,
but it's not fulfilling the passion,
oh,
which was
absolutely.
the original objective, right?
Why you
So
moved
then,
in the first
yeah.
place?
So
Yeah,
suddenly
absolutely.
Yeah.
it's not fulfilling that. So I understand what you're saying.
I read this very interesting. Sorry, I'm
No,
digressing.
no.
About and it's kind of a funny story. So Johnny got up and he didn't want to go to school. So he was saying, "Today I don't want to go to school." And his mother came and said, "Why don't you want to go to school?" So when he was trying to, he said, "No, no, I don't feel like going to school today." It turns out it's a long story, but it turns out that Johnny is the principal of the school, right? And
All the teachers are
sorry to
bothering me. I don't want to
digress.
go to school.
Exactly. I mean, that is so important. I think the whole idea about the second innings is that, do you have the joy the way? Do you have the ullas? I call it ullas. Do you wake up in the morning and you want to go to work? In these last 12, 13 years, I haven't had a bad day at work. Now, it doesn't mean that I have not goofed up, or maybe a workshop
Mm-hmm.
didn't go south, or something didn't happen. There
Yeah,
were
yeah.
those
I'm
days.
touching wood here.
Yeah. But it is still yours. You want to come back and
Mm.
improve. You want to
Yeah,
read about it. You want to do something new. You want to try it
yeah,
again tomorrow. You don't treat it as a bad day. You still are excited about the next day,
yeah.
and
You either win or you learn something.
you learn. And I think that's the whole merit of the second inning. If you're not doing
Mm.
something which involves you like that, then it is not worth it. Yeah. Then do what you're doing anyway. Uh, the
Wow.
the other thing is that what I learned very early in my life is that, and especially because of the people that we started working, we were working with the CXOs, we were working with the senior leaders. That's the segment that we stuck to. And I realized very soon there is very little to teach there. It is more about having great conversations, and in those conversations, getting the insights. Now, you have to obviously bring something valuable to the room. So you will bring some frameworks, you'll bring some knowledge from other companies, you'll bring some industry information, blah, 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 so that that conversation can become insightful. But the whole idea about being in that conversation is my mojo. So I would just keep doing that ever and ever, so I will never let that go.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would do differently is, and that is what we have started to do now, but maybe it would have been saner to do it a little earlier, is this idea about if I am not doing that administrative job, can I find somebody to do the administrative? So the company still needs to scale up. The company will still benefit with the relationships that you've created. So I sometimes joke about this, that and this we learned from the startups that we worked with in the US, that very often when the investors come in, they kick the founder out, or they don't let him stay the CEO because he's coming in the way of the company. Maybe I was coming in the way of my own company because I was so passionate about being in the room that if I, as long as I'm getting that, I'm okay with it. But now that we have to scale it up, then maybe I should not be the CEO of my company. And somebody else should do that job of
Yeah.
looking at multiple needs from our clients, looking at multiple facilitators, and now
Hmm.
therefore we are beginning to create products and offerings. We are beginning to add more facilitators in the fray. We have started to productize. Maybe I should have done that earlier. And therefore, looking at your passion on and what you do to see, can I build an organization out of it? Can it be scaled up? Can there be other people who can come and join and do something that you don't like to do, but is important for the entity, and invite some other people to do that work? I think that is important. Mm, To say it more simply, one should know when should one get out of the way of his own company. When do you not bring the skill sets which are important now for the growth of the company? And if you don't have them, have the um, maturity to respectfully go out of that job, and create an able person there who can do this.
Earlier on, Ravi, you actually quite methodically talking about the kind of advice you would give to people on how they can go about doing the fence, getting off the fence and doing something about it. In terms of the parachute book that you talked about and the methodology and process, that kind of thing. Any other things that you can give as advice to someone who's sitting on the fence and saying that, I want to do this, how do I do it, kind of thing? What do I do? Any advice you would give?
I think I think taking a risk is oversimplified and too romanticized. I think taking a risk definitely means learning about what you're plunging into, and therefore this idea about know a little bit, but don't wait till you get everything right.
But do your
Wait.
pre-work in that sense.
But do a pre-work and expose yourself to that situation.
Mm.
So if I were to become a comedian, I would go and do stand-up comedy at least in my own home, yeah, in front of my own people, in front of my own
Mm.
friends, and see if I fall flat on my face and people don't laugh, then am I really serious about what I'm thinking? So there
Mm.
is a certain, see, the thing is that whatever you're doing, at the end of it, you want it to be rewarding for the people who are experiencing it, and for your own sake. You have to make the
Mm.
money out of it. You have to fulfill your commitments, your expectations out of you. So at the end of it, that has to happen. And if you get a second check on it, then that is worthwhile. So taking a risk, I think, is overrated. It's a romantic concept, but being aware of what I think some of the most people who are known to be risk takers are the people who are most cautious. They have checked out what they're getting into. Otherwise, it's a charge on the windmill. Yeah, you can be lucky.
Yeah, it's
We are not.
possible to do risk mitigation. It's possible to,
Yes.
I mean, obviously, there will be like you gave the mango tree example, there will
Yeah.
always be that little bit of time when you're going from one side to the other where
Yes.
that, your heart will sink and you will
Yeah.
feel that anxiety and all that. And that actually is, I mean, is also a manifestation of risk.
Yeah.
But that feeling or that period of time, there can be risk mitigation for that, is what I hear you saying.
Yeah. So
And I
I
think
think it
risk
was.
is it's about a balance, right? It's not like I'm going from zero risk to high risk.
Yeah.
If you continue doing what you're doing, whether in corporate or wherever, that also carries a certain risk with it.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Mm.
absolutely.
So it's
Absolutely.
basically balancing it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to learn. You have to. You can't be. Your head can't be in the air. Your head can't be in the clouds. You have to see the
Mm.
earth and where you are. That's one part. I think the whole idea about passion and purpose is important. If you don't know what you are, why you're doing it, and where will you get to, whatever you're doing in the new life, that is important. It has to pull you. Your ability to build new skills and new competence is critical. Calling, making sales call, waiting in the lobby, all those are new abilities or new state of being. Being vulnerable.
On the passion and purpose thing, Ravi, again, those are big words and people have described it differently. But one common thing that's emerged is everybody saying you really have to enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
much so that if you don't enjoy it, somebody said, I was getting business, but because I didn't enjoy it, I took a hard call and, I decided not to do it.
yeah.
So I think that's what it kind of boils down to.
That's
You
that's
to
why.
really enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's why I said, I mean, testing your craft is important. I think if you don't do that, if you just have having that little um, overconfidence that I can do it will be useful because that makes you try something new, but test it quickly and look for real data there. Don't pretend that you can, because you're risking other people who dependent on you, whose consequences are important for them. There will still be a little sense of loss or uneasiness. Atul, you picked up that one so beautifully. That when you'll not have a branch to hold on to, and you're still going from one tree to another,
Yeah.
there will be almost moments where you'll say, maybe I didn't do the right thing. But getting over that with some people who hold your hand is important. So
Mm.
yeah. I think, therefore, what you guys are doing is tremendous. It is helping people to learn about this through stories, through other people's experiences, and then offering all of us to them. So the fact that we're building a little community which will hopefully grow. If you pick up any document on the future growth of India, whether it is the World Bank or it is the IMF or it is the ADB, everybody says India will grow at about 6 to 8%. Then over the next 15-20 years, the per capita income will multiply. And it will multiply the organized industry. The organized corporate is less than 10% of Indian GDP. The whole of the Dalal Street put together is less than 10%, which means that India will grow on the basis of a lot of entrepreneurship.
Mm.
There's a huge opportunity, huge.
Mm.
And it is that middle class becoming entrepreneurial. It'll happen because a lot of people will take the plunge and start the enterprises. That's what happened in all other economies becoming larger. Economies did not grow only on the strength of large corporates becoming larger.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Mm.
And therefore, there is a whole environment which is going to be supported. There's a whole environment
Mm.
which is going to be positive. If one has to take a chance, we are in a lucky place right now. It is,
Mm.
it is, it is just the right time. The next 30 years are golden, really. And therefore, having that supporting system, which will come in handy. If you feel you can do it, spend a little time with the thought, learn the ropes, test it out, and then be ready for a little sense of anxiety. But it is wonderful on the other side.
Very well said.
That is very well said, and that's a great place. I think we can kind of call it a wrap. Thanks a lot, Ravi. Thanks a lot for sharing. Yeah, it's been a great conversation. I have actually learned more about your journey than I knew, far more than I knew, and it's been great to listen to that. And also, it's a like we've been talking about the fact that there will be bits that resonate with a lot of people, and they'll say, "Okay, yeah, this sounds interesting." If because this is the way I feel, I can do that too. So thanks a lot for sharing. It's not easy. Vulnerability is and transparency are hard to do. So we really appreciate your time and your effort in doing that. Thanks a lot.
Thank, yeah.
Absolutely. And I echo what Atul is saying. Thank you so much. Really appreciate sharing all of those stories. And I'm sure it'll inspire somebody somewhere, you know, to think
Hope so.
differently,
Yeah.
do differently.
Thank
Yeah.
you, guys. I think Atul and Suman. I think this is such a wonderful platform, and thank you for building it. And